Hey guys, it's Casey. Here's 5 reasons to legalize every single drug. So first of all, you've got the human rights argument, and that's the idea that every single individual in the world or in your country should be able to consume whatever substance it is that they like, no matter what other people think about it or whether it's good or bad for them. A lot of people seem to forget that bodily autonomy should not just exist in areas such as abortion or plastic surgery, but it should exist in medicine, and it should be allowed within pharmacology so that people can consume whatever medicine it is that they like, because the government is never going to be able to determine what is best for every single individual throughout their country. And especially if you're in a country like the United States, that's over 300 million people. In short, the idea behind the human rights argument is that if an act doesn't interfere with the rights of anybody else, then it shouldn't be a crime to commit that act. For example, it doesn't really make sense that drug use is criminalized because using a drug doesn't hurt anybody, and it doesn't necessarily even hurt the individual that uses the drug. Drug use is certainly not negative in every single situation, and there's nothing really inherently negative with drug use either. There are a lot of factors to take into account, and you also got to realize that we already use drugs in our daily lives without taking negative benefits. For example, we can go to the store, we can get the over-the-counter drugs, or we can go to the grocery store and get some alcohol, we can get some nicotine, we can get some cannabis, we can get some kratom, depending on where you are, or any other number of substances. People need to be able to have responsibility for their decisions and to be able to control what their life is, because you really only have one life. And if you're not able to make the decisions that you see are best for you in that one life, then what's even the point in living? Because we've got to be able to do what we need in our own pursuit for happiness. We need to be able to make the decisions that we think are best for us, whether or not others agree with them, whether or not they follow a norm, and whether or not it is good or bad for us. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if something's good or bad for us. What matters is that we have the ability to control what we put inside of our bodies. Second reason to legalize every drug is the fact that prohibition has never worked. We had alcohol prohibition, that was a pretty major failure. And then we've had the prohibition of every other single drug throughout history, whether it be cocaine, crack cocaine, LSD, all the psychedelics, everything that is illegal today or controlled. And the only result from all of that has been a waste of money and the perpetuation of addiction, harm, and pain. Overall, prohibition has affected us opposite of what we were intending to reach. We were intending to reduce rates of addiction, and rather the opposite is what happened. So then why not decriminalization? Well, we could decriminalize, but that wouldn't achieve much. Decriminalization is just another form of prohibition. So the only thing that decriminalization actually achieves is that it reduces the fear that people have in seeking treatment. However, it doesn't necessarily prevent people from being incarcerated for using drugs, because this is how decriminalization works. It makes it so that a drug is legal to carry at a certain limit. So you can't have more than a certain amount of a substance, measured usually in grams or whatever other measurement, such as milligrams, micrograms, could be whatever. Some people think that decriminalization means that these drugs are going to be regulated and manufactured legally so that people can access them without having to go through a black market, but that is not what decriminalization is. It's still a form of prohibition because the drugs are still prohibited, and thus they are not sold on a legal market. They are still sold by criminals and drug trafficking organizations along with the cartels and many other people. And that's why I say that decriminalization doesn't actually do much, because the only positive effect that is actually achieved is the increased likelihood that people are going to seek treatment due to a reduced fear of prosecution. However, even that difference is not very statistically significant when compared to the overall problem. So with all of that said, decriminalization, it doesn't do much, and legalization is the only thing that's actually going to give us all of those benefits in terms of making these drugs safer, ensuring that less people are killed, less people are harmed, and overall society is healthier and happier. Third reason to legalize every drug is that when prohibition exists, it creates a sense of immorality and a sense that something is bad, whatever that means, and it causes a stigmatization to be associated with the prohibited good or service. And so what you have is that people with addiction become stigmatized, and it's actually been found concurrently in many studies that addiction is more stigmatized than mental health disorders. And that's quite funny because addiction should honestly be seen as a mental health disorder. Well, addiction seems to rank the top at stigmatization because people seem to hate addiction more than any other condition when it comes to the mental health conditions and their varying degrees of stigmatization. Overall, prohibition, it just reduces the likelihood that anybody with substance use disorder or an addiction or any problem with drug use that requires intervention and assistance, anybody in that category, if prohibition exists, they're going to be far less likely to actually seek treatment if they truly need it. And that's a pretty major problem because we're looking at the rates of opioid overdoses and the rates of addiction in this country, in the United States, and we wonder how we got here, but it's because we are not treating the people who need the most help with care and compassion. We're not doing what needs to be done for those that need it most. We're just hurting the problem. We're causing more havoc and more chaos than what truly has to be caused. Fourth reason to legalize every single drug. When a drug is prohibited, it's not sold by companies that have regulation, standards, and procedures that they have to follow. No, it's rather sold by criminals, drug trafficking organizations, and cartels. And then you have the problem that we have in Mexico, which inevitably conspires as the power of these drug trafficking organizations continuously increases. And when these cartels continuously increase in their power and influence, what you have is the Mexican army gets in a battle with the Sinaloa cartel, and then the Sinaloa cartel kicks the Mexican army's ass. Overall, prohibition, it creates corruption, which thus is incorporated into the government because selling these drugs, it's so much more profitable when it's illegal. And now what you have when you have the situation in Mexico is that the government's in on it, in on all the cartels, because the cartels, they control pretty much everything. However, instead of that situation occurring, what we could rather have are pharmaceutical companies legally selling these substances with the aforementioned regulation, standards, and procedures. This would bring a lot of wealth and money to the United States and other countries that sell these substances, and it would provide a lot of tax revenue, which could be utilized for whatever. After all, I think it is a better idea if the government and the people of society are the ones that benefit from the sale of these drugs, which is inevitably going to happen no matter what. You can't stop it. I think it's a much better idea that lawful people profit from these rather than allowing criminals to profit off of them, as we have done for well over a century. The fifth reason to legalize every single drug is because when you legalize these substances, they become pure, they're regulated, and they have standards and procedures. This is what makes these drugs safe. The reason that drugs are dangerous and risky when they're illegal is because they are highly impure, they're often laced, and there are a number of other variables that increase the danger of said substance, along with the fact that the users of the substance cannot accurately measure what quantity of the drug it is that they're consuming, that they believe it is that they're consuming. It might not always be what they believe it is. And you've also got the potential for allergic reactions. You might get a drug that is lethal, like you could get, say, what's commonly called N-bombs, N-bomb 25I, something like that. It's an analog to LSD, and sometimes, not very often, not anymore, it's sold as LSD, and people have died from it, such as this one kid, and I believe it was Florida, 17 years old, took an N-bomb, died that night on the beach, face planted in the sand. How unfortunate. Well, it could have been prevented had we legalized these drugs, and that kid would have known what he was consuming was actually an N-bomb. Remember, the only reason that fentanyl is dangerous is because it's illegal. It could be pretty safe to consume and use anytime you want if it was legal, because there are a bunch of people that use it regularly for pain relief. And I'm talking about people that have medication, some something like a pill, or maybe they have a nasal inhaler, they might have something else, who knows. The point is, people are using fentanyl at home by themselves for pain relief, and they are 100% fine because they have accurately measured doses that are pure, and they know exactly what they are consuming and how much to take and how much not to take. When you know what it takes to kill yourself, it's pretty easy to not kill yourself. However, that's all I've got to say on this topic. If you learned something, please like, comment, or subscribe. And this is Casey Camacho Perez, out. Have a great day, everybody.